Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the Firewall. I'm Bill Whittle. My fellow Americans, good evening. Our president has just delivered his State of the Union speech, and I would like to provide a conservative rebuttal, delivered without the unfair advantage of added graphics this time. Let's just call it a counter-thesis. You know, it saddens me enormously to say that I believe that President Obama has revealed yet again that the chief executive of the United States does not in any significant way understand what makes the country he has been elected to lead so remarkable. The president and his Democratic Party cohorts simply do not and apparently cannot understand that the key to the American greatness that he so frequently evoked in his speech is not due to the American government, but rather to the lack of it. 1/20th of the world's population has produced 1/4 of its economic output precisely because, up until very recently, Washington was just a relatively out-of-the-way little backwater, and the real engine of America's greatness was to be found in places like New York and Atlanta, Chicago and Houston, Los Angeles and Pittsburgh and Detroit. American business created American wealth, and individual genius has been what has fed American innovation, not government programs. Now, just as a small example of the inherent contradiction in the president's logic, he raised the success of the Wright brothers as an example of why we need more spending, more taxes, more regulation, and more government. Now, it is true that the U.S. government did indeed subsidize the effort to develop heavier-than-air flight. Unfortunately for President Obama, all of those subsidies went to former Smithsonian director Samuel P. Langley, whose heavy, bloated flying machines failed utterly. They just splashed into the Potomac, largely due to the lack of experimentation and individual initiative. The Wright brothers, on the other hand, succeeded where Langley and the government failed because they were free from regulation, and they had enough of their personal wealth as bicycle mechanics to spend after taxes to pursue their passion and do what the most famous, well-funded minds of the age utterly failed to do. That's what makes America great, and that's at the core of what the president just doesn't seem to understand. Now, next, the president claimed credit for 1 million new jobs created. I don't know where he comes up with this number, but what cannot be denied is that unemployment is at levels we have not seen since the Great Depression. Now, if Mr. Obama's policies have in fact created 1 million new jobs, then simple logic, based on those unemployment numbers, shows us that his policies have destroyed many millions more. The president then said, and with self-control that I find very admirable, I must admit, that it was now time to, quote, take responsibility for our deficit, unquote. Now, it is true that Barack Obama did not invent deficit spending, but for the president, who in a single year quadrupled the annual deficit from its previous high water mark, well, for him to call that taking responsibility for the deficit, well, that almost defies belief. Sir, with respect, our educational system is indeed in a shambles, but some of us can still add. The president spoke about the impressive gains being made by India and especially China, and here he really begins his pitch for taxing and spending Americans' money by the government in order to create innovation and to win the future. Well, first of all, Mr. President, China has very roughly 4 times our population, and they produce 1/4 of our economic output. China is succeeding where they copy us. We should not be looking to China in order to win the future. To cite that China is building new airports while we do not is a little disingenuous as well. You know, there's almost 20,000 airports in the United States today, and about 600 of them provide routine commercial service. China today has about 150, all told. So of course they're building new ones, and we are not. We're not building new ones because we already have them. We have them because of the private airline industry, not because of government make-work programs. Now, likewise, China's economic growth is fueled by cheap energy, namely coal. China adds new coal-fired power plants every week. Their coal plants are very dirty, ours are very clean. But the critical point is their energy costs are low and ours are high and getting higher. They would be far lower, and we would be far better off strategically if Mr. Obama's administration would allow America to use the oil, coal, and natural gas buried under our own soil. Mr. President, government innovation is not winning our economic future. Government regulation is killing it. Now, let's briefly talk about the green economy that liberals continue to tout. If solar panels on the roof were cheap and affordable and caused American homes to spend less on electricity, then any sensible person would be standing in line to buy them. But they aren't, and they don't. And furthermore, wind and solar power plants require conventional backup power plants, that would be coal and oil and nuclear, to provide about 75% of the wind and solar capacity on the same grid, since those green energy sources are so unreliable. No, Mr. President, a bold commitment to America's energy future would be to announce tax breaks and regulatory slashing that would enable America's existing power companies to build hundreds or thousands of next-generation, safe, reliable, and clean nuclear power plants. And yet, funding to simply open the already completed Yucca Mountain nuclear waste storage facility was one of the very few budget cuts you were willing to make last year. Talking about clean energy for the future while cutting off the clean nuclear power that powers France and Japan and many others, well, sir, with all due respect, that seems a little dishonest to me. Now, on to education. Here is the single salient fact. America already spends many times per student more than any other country in the world, and yet our test scores are relatively appalling. The President spoke of pilot programs that have improved American test scores at a small fraction of the cost we pay daily. That's wonderful. But why haven't these reforms swept the country? Well, largely, it's due to the resistance on the part of the teachers' unions, which, like the other unions, provide the bedrock political and financial support of the Democratic Party. We conservatives, on the other hand, believe that competition, which provides far better services at far lower cost, would solve this problem too. But our president opposes the voucher system that would give parents the power to choose what schools to send their children to. The president eloquently and repeatedly invoked families as our first resources. Why then does he oppose letting American families decide where to spend their money on something as important as their own kids' education? And now finally on to health care. Our president loves to say that his massive new health care spending lowers the deficit, but Obamacare is only deficit neutral because the legislation was written to allow 10 years of revenue against 6 years of expenses. Don't take my word for this, you can look it up. Once you take this flimflammery out of the equation or roll into the next decade, best case, it's a financial disaster. Right now, all across the country, thousands of companies are cutting, not expanding, their health care coverage due to the Democrats' health care plan. And the SEIU, that'd be the Service Employees International Union, Barack Obama's most loyal political base, is begging to be exempted from Obamacare. Now, what does that tell you? It tells me that maybe it is indeed time to scrap this abomination and start again with a plan that makes market sense, like allowing big companies like Walmart to use their buying power to lower pharmaceutical costs or letting insurance companies compete across state lines. Oh, and parenthetically, having the government make American citizens buy something that they don't want to buy is unconstitutional. Niceties like that matter to us old-fashioned types. You know, Mr. President, your entire speech was a sales pitch for more government, but it's more government that's gotten us into this trouble in the first place. The answer to too much government is not more government, and it's not new government, and it's not even smart government. The answer to too much government is less government. Now, I'm afraid it's painfully obvious that Washington politicians of both parties and over decades of time prove daily that they are incapable of living within their means. It's all about government spending. America does not need a high-speed rail system to get people to work, because if they did, some company would be providing that service right now at a profit. Americans need to live in an America that lets them keep most of their own money and under a government that for the most part leaves them alone. You can't have it both ways, sir. You can't use examples of private initiative like that of the small business owner who, on his own initiative and without any government innovation stimulus, rescued the Chilean miners and did what the entire U.S. government could not do. You can't use that as an example of why we should build a bigger state. If you want to justify a big state, you have to use examples of where big states outdo private initiative. And President Obama, with respect, sir, I don't think you can do it, which is why you didn't try. Now, to keep these messages coming, go to declarationentertainment.com and become a citizen producer. I'm Bill Whittle, and we'll see you next time on The Firewall.